The Duke and Duchess will move out of Kensington Palace and into this place, Frogmore Cottage.
Frogmore Cottage is situated in Windsor's home park, just outside of London. It's a fixer-upper.
The 93-year-old monarch actually gave that cottage to Prince Harry and Meghan Markle.
There was nothing really available at Kensington Palace, and that's why they're moving, because really they're starting their family life together.
But the newlyweds have got ahead of the game. They have already put in plans to freshen the landscape.
While it may seem to be a sudden change, the announcement revealed that it has been a, quote, long-planned move.
They're getting ready to start a family in a new home.
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex will not be returning as working members of the royal family.
Prince Harry and Meghan will not return as working members of the royal family.
And we were here to serve. For those reasons, it brings me great sadness that it has come to this.
Prince Harry surely is now a traitor to the country that he once served.
London's Daily Mail calls it despicable. You sold your soul, Harry.
My words are not dangerous, but the spin of my words are very dangerous.
He has to find a way to get back to England, and he just doesn't seem to be able to do that. If that's what he wants, and
Prince Harry's memoir Spare is finally here.
Controversial memoir has jumped to the top of several bestseller lists. Spare has been making headlines.
Has accused the royal family of betrayal for remaining silent over attacks against him and Meghan in the media.
But I really hope that at some point they can figure things out.
Meghan Markle and Prince Harry are being asked to vacate Frogmore Cottage, their royal residence in the UK.
It looks like Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are facing an eviction notice.
Going to go out on a whim and say those sorts of things about your family, the gravy train has to come to an end eventually.
In the summer of 2018, just weeks after the most watched royal wedding in modern history, Queen Elizabeth II made a quiet, private decision about her grandson. She would give him a home, not a residence assigned by a committee, not a property negotiated through palace bureaucracy. A home, chosen by her, given by her, with her name on the gesture. Frogmore Cottage, a 5-bedroom house on the Windsor estate, walking distance from the place she had loved most in the world. It was meant to be Harry and Meghan's English anchor, the Queen's way of saying, this is yours, this is home, this is the family making space for you. 5 years later, that same cottage would be the site of one of the most painful eviction notices in modern royal history. And the woman who had given it as a wedding gift would not be alive to stop it. If you want more deep dives like this, the private gestures, the broken promises, the moments the cameras never caught, make sure to subscribe to Royal Archives, because what Charlotte Griffiths has now described, in her own words on the record, isn't just the eviction itself. It's the chain of decisions, the emotional fallout, and the strange, deliberate way Harry chose to mark the date afterward. A date he turned into a message. A date he weaponized against his father. And in doing so, he severed the last physical thread to the grandmother who gave it to him in the first place. The story of Frogmore Cottage begins not with a scandal, but with a wedding. May of 2018. St. George's Chapel. The Queen, 92 years old, sitting in a position she had occupied at countless royal weddings before. But this one was different. Harry, the grandson she had famously favored, was marrying an American actress. The institution had absorbed unprecedented modernity in a single afternoon. And the Queen, by all accounts, wanted the couple to feel they belonged. Frogmore Cottage was her instrument for that. It had been a grace and favor residence, originally built in 1801 for Queen Charlotte. By 2018, it had fallen into a state of disrepair. The Queen could have offered the Sussexes any number of more modest options. She chose this one. She wanted them on the Windsor estate. Close enough to walk to the castle, close enough to bring Archie to her for tea. That detail matters. The cottage was selected for proximity. It was a gesture of inclusion, not a parking spot. What the public didn't know at the time, and what Charlotte Griffiths and other royal commentators have confirmed since, is that Meghan herself was reportedly underwhelmed by the gift. The expectation, according to Griffiths speaking on GB News, was that Meghan thought she was moving into Frogmore House, the grand mansion next door with its sweeping lawns and historic interiors. What she got instead was the cottage. Smaller, less impressive. A house in need of significant work. That mismatch between what the Queen offered and what the Sussexes expected would echo through everything that came afterward. Renovations began almost immediately. The figure that became infamous was £2.4 million, paid for initially by British taxpayers through the sovereign grant. The renovations included reconfiguring the cottage into a single-family home, modernizing every system in the building, and adding the kind of finishes that a young royal couple expecting their first child would want. The press coverage was punishing. The cost became a national talking point, and the Queen, who had given the cottage in good faith, watched as her quiet wedding gift turned into a tabloid scandal she had never anticipated. But she did not take it back. That was never her way. By 2019, Harry and Meghan had moved in. The couple's first months at Frogmore Cottage coincided with Archie's birth, with the deepening rift between the Sussex and Cambridge households, and with the slow unraveling of Harry's working relationship with the rest of the family. The cottage that was meant to be a beginning began to feel like an outpost. Staff turnover at the Sussex household became its own news cycle. Frogmore, the Queen's gift of welcome, was quietly becoming the address from which the Sussexes were already planning to leave. What happened next surprised even the most experienced royal observers. In January of 2020, the Sussexes announced their decision to step back from senior royal duties. They had not consulted the Queen. The announcement was made in defiance of the explicit advice of her senior aides. And within months, Harry and Meghan were on a plane to Canada and then to California, leaving Frogmore Cottage behind, fully renovated, barely lived in, and still officially their UK residence. The Queen did not evict them. That too was not her way. She allowed them to keep the cottage as their British base. She wanted, even then, a door left open. Frogmore remained theirs. The wedding gift remained intact. The grandmother's gesture, though wounded by everything that had unfolded, was still standing. She would die in September of 2022 with that gesture still in place, and that is the detail Charlotte Griffiths returned to again and again in her commentary. The Queen had given Frogmore. The Queen had kept giving Frogmore, even when she had every institutional and personal reason to revoke it. The cottage, in the final years of her reign, became one of the only physical objects that still tied Harry to the British royal family. The titles he kept were ceremonial. The home he kept was real. Then Spare was published. January 2023. Harry's memoir landed with the force of a bomb inside Buckingham Palace. The book attacked William directly. It attacked Camilla repeatedly. It exposed private conversations, private fights, private griefs. And according to Charlotte Griffiths, speaking on GB News, it was specifically Harry's portrayal of Camilla, Charles's wife, the woman Charles had spent decades trying to elevate into public acceptance, that became, in her words, the reason his father kicked him out of Frogmore. Griffiths described it plainly. The eviction was not random. The eviction was retaliation for what Harry had written about the woman Charles loved most. And Griffiths added a detail that has been overlooked in much of the coverage. According to her, it was a really difficult decision for Charles. No father wants to kick his son out of his home. But, in her phrasing, Harry had gone beyond the pale. Within weeks of Spare's publication, the request to vacate Frogmore Cottage was delivered. By June of 2023, the Sussexes had handed back the keys. Their remaining possessions were shipped to Montecito. The cottage that the Queen had given as a wedding gift in 2018 was, 5 years later, no longer Harry's home. What the Queen had given, Charles had taken back. That is the moment, the symbolic moment, where Harry's final, tangible link to his grandmother was severed. Not by death. Death had already happened. But by the undoing of her last living gesture toward him. Every other inheritance was abstract. Memories, titles, a place in the line of succession. Frogmore was the only thing she had given him with her own hands, and it was gone. According to Tom Quinn, another royal commentator who has tracked the Sussexes closely, Harry was absolutely furious and in tears about the eviction. He felt his father had no right to do it. He felt it was purely vindictive. Griffiths' reporting aligns with this, though she frames Harry's reaction less sympathetically. In her words, Harry was incensed, and in her assessment, the anger was disproportionate because Harry had been the one to leave Britain, the one to call the country a place he needed to escape, the one to publicly distance himself from everything Frogmore represented. Yet, he could not let it go, and here is where the story takes its strangest, most revealing turn. And this is the part Griffiths reported that almost no one else picked up on. In April of 2024, Harry quietly updated his official business records in the United Kingdom. He had to declare a primary country of residence for his company, Travelist. He chose, finally, to list the United States. But the date he chose to mark the start of his U.S. residency was not the date he and Meghan had actually moved to California in 2020. It was not the date of any major personal milestone. It was the exact date that his father had kicked him out of Frogmore Cottage. Griffiths called it what it looked like: trolling. Harry, in her assessment, had selected the most painful possible date, the date of the eviction, and used it as a formal administrative middle finger to his father, a bureaucratic act of revenge, a public record that, to anyone who knew the timeline, said, "This is when you cast me out, and this is when I stopped being yours." In Griffiths' words on GB News, nothing is by chance with Harry. He is, in her phrasing, kind of spiteful. He can't let go of the past, and in choosing that specific date, he had transformed an administrative formality into a permanent timestamp of grievance. Across social media, one question kept coming up. Why this date? Why not 2020, when the actual move happened? Why not any of the dozens of dates that could have marked his transition to American life? The answer, observers concluded, was the answer Griffiths had already given. It was deliberate. It was a message. And the message was aimed squarely at his father, but it also accidentally became something else. It became the official date on which Harry, by his own hand, marked the end of his belonging to Britain. The same Britain his grandmother had spent 5 years trying to keep him connected to. Behind closed doors, palace insiders described the king's response as restrained. He did not retaliate publicly. He did not make a statement. According to those familiar with his thinking, he saw the date choice as confirmation of what he had suspected when he made the eviction decision. That Harry was no longer reachable through gestures of patience. The Queen's strategy, the strategy of waiting, of leaving doors open, of absorbing pain without responding, had clearly not worked with this son. Charles was not his mother. Charles was, finally, willing to close the door. And that closure happened at Frogmore. The long-term consequences of the Frogmore decision have rippled outward in ways the family is still managing. The cottage itself sat empty for a period. The symbolism of an empty Frogmore, the Queen's gift, vacated, unused, became its own kind of statement about what the Sussexes had walked away from, and what Charles had refused to keep alive. For Harry, the eviction marked something deeper than the loss of a UK residence. It marked the loss of standing. Without Frogmore, he had no British base, no official home, no physical address tied to the institution. Every visit to the UK afterward would require a hotel, or a private arrangement, or the careful negotiation of where exactly the Duke of Sussex could lay his head when he came back to the country of his birth. That practical loss, Griffiths suggested, was matched by an emotional loss that Harry could not fully articulate even to himself, because the cottage was not just real estate. The cottage was his grandmother's last word. She had given it to him at the start of his marriage when she still believed the family could hold together. She had kept it for him through Megxit, through Oprah, through the Netflix series, through every public wound. She had kept it for him because Frogmore was the line she would not cross, the gift she would not revoke, the door she would not close. And in March of 2023, 6 months after her funeral, Charles closed it. The question that has lingered in royal circles since is whether the Queen, had she lived, would have made the same decision. The consensus drawn from those who knew her best is that she would not have. she would have absorbed Spare. She would have absorbed the Camilla attacks. She would have absorbed the documentary, the memoir, the interviews, and Frogmore would have stayed Harry's, because Frogmore was hers to give and she had given it. Charles was not bound by his mother's restraint. Charles was bound by his loyalty to his wife. And when those two loyalties came into conflict, between the gift his mother had made and the woman his son had insulted, Charles chose Camilla. That choice is, in the end, the meaning of Frogmore. Not the building, not the renovations, not the eviction. The meaning is what the cottage represented as long as the Queen lived, and what it stopped representing the moment she could no longer protect it. It was the last room in Britain that belonged to Harry through her, and when it was gone, the thread was gone. The Queen had spent decades building the relationships that would survive her. She had bent rules, absorbed insults, swallowed grief, and waited. Frogmore was one of the few things she had given Harry that he could not lose by his own actions. He could lose his role as a working royal, and did. He could lose his security arrangements, and did. He could lose his place in the family's public events, and did. But Frogmore, the wedding gift, was hers to give and hers alone to take back, and she did not take it back. Her son did. What happens next in the long arc of the Sussex story will be written without Frogmore in it. The visits to the UK will become rarer. The presence on the Windsor estate is over. The grandchildren the Queen wanted close to her will grow up in California, and the cottage that was supposed to anchor them to her memory will belong to someone else, or to no one at all. Charlotte Griffiths put it bluntly in her commentary. Harry is hung up on Frogmore in a way that doesn't match how little he actually used it. And that contradiction, the obsession with a place he barely lived in, is the clearest evidence of what Frogmore actually meant. It was never about the house. It was about who gave it to him. It was about the only person in the family who had given him something with no conditions attached. And losing it, even years after losing her, was losing her again. The cottage stands today on the Windsor estate, a quiet building near the place where the Queen now rests. The gift she made is no longer in the hands she made it for. The door she kept open has been closed by another, and the grandson she tried hardest to keep close has marked the date of his eviction as the day he officially stopped being British. It is, in the end, the most precise definition of a final break that the modern monarchy has produced. A gift undone, a thread cut, a grandmother's last gesture, dissolved, and somewhere in the records of a small business filing, a date chosen deliberately by a son who could not say goodbye any other way, that marks not the day he left Britain, but the day Britain, through his father's hand, finally let him go. If this story moved you, or if you want to keep going deeper into the private decisions, the broken promises, and the moments the public never saw, subscribe to Royal Archives, because the Queen's final years held more secrets than the institution has yet admitted, and we are still, video by video, putting them on the record.